Have you ever noticed that you can be physically here, but mentally somewhere else almost all day? And have you ever wondered why the more you chase a better future, the more empty the current moment starts to feel? Welcome back to the channel today. We are going to explore a simple guide to living in the present moment in a way that feels real and usable, not like a perfect calm fantasy. Two ideas will hold everything together. First, the present moment is not a motivational phrase. It is the only place where life actually happens and where real change can begin. Second, most suffering is not created by what is happening right now, but by the mind leaving now and then, fighting the story it creates about past and future. Let me tell this as a story because the present moment is not something you understand once. It is something you return to again and again until returning becomes more natural than wandering. There was a person who thought they were doing fine. They had responsibilities, they handled tasks, they could talk and laugh and plan and problem solve. On the outside, life moved forward, but inside there was a quiet feeling that something was always missing, like they were living beside their own life rather than inside it. They woke up and the first thing that arrived was not breath, not alevines, not simple awareness. The first thing that arrived was the mind-day stream of commentary and pressure. The day began as a mental checklist and a low hum of worry. They would eat breakfast while thinking about work. They would walk while replaying a conversation from yesterday. They would doctor while rehearsing a conversation for tomorrow. They would sit with friends while checking for approval in their head. They would lie in bed while building worst-case futures. Nothing dramatic was happening, and yet they felt tired all the time. And the most confusing part was this: they could not point to one clear external problem that explained the exhaustion. So they did what many sincere people do. They tried to fix the outside. They improved routines. They downloaded apps. They organized goals. They planned harder. They tried to become more productive, more confident, more successful. They thought if they could arrange life into the right shape, then they could finally relax. But the more they arranged, the more the mind found new things to arrange in peace. Stayed just one step ahead, like a horizon you never reach. Then life gave them a small moment of honesty, not a crisis, not a tragedy, just a pause. They were sitting somewhere waiting. The phone was in their hand. The mind was jumping from thought to thought, and suddenly they noticed something simple and unsettling. I am not here. They looked around and realized the world was actually quiet. The sounds were ordinary. The light was ordinary. The body was sitting in a chair. The breath was happening. But their attention was not in any of it. Their attention was trapped in mental time. This was the first crack in the trance, because if you can notice that you are not here, then something in you is already here. Something in you is aware of the absence. That something is awareness. So the person tried a simple experiment. They did not try to force the mind to stop. They simply tried to come back to what was already present. They felt the breath. They felt the hands. They noticed the feet touching the ground. They listened to sound without labeling. They noticed the space around the body. For a few seconds, the mind softened, not because the mind was defeated, but because attention stopped feeding its endless story. And in those seconds, the person felt something they had been craving without knowing it. Relief. Not the relief of getting what you want, not the relief of solving every problem, the relief of not leaving the moment, the relief of being whole for a second. Then the mind returned like it always does. It said, okay, now, keep this now. Do it right now, make it permanent now, become present all the time. And as soon as the mind turned presence into a project, the relief tightened again. Because presence cannot be held by force. The present moment is not something you own, it is something you enter. So the person learned the first real lesson of living in the present moment. Do not try to hold now. Return to now. Return is gentle. Return is repeated. Return is the whole path. Over the next days, they began to notice how the mind leaves the present in predictable ways. One way was rumination. The mind replayed the past as if replay could change it. It searched for mistakes. It built arguments. It imagined what they should have said. It tried to rewrite reality with thought. Another way was worry. The mind rehearsed the future as if rehearsal could guarantee safety. It tried to control uncertainty by imagining every possible outcome, and each imagined outcome created tension in the body, which the mind then used as proof that the worry was necessary. Another way was comparison. The mind measured the present moment against an image of how it should be. It said, "This moment is not enough. This is not exciting enough. I should be further ahead. I should feel better. I should be different." And that word "should" was like a hammer. It hit the present moment until the present moment felt like a problem. The person began to see something clearly. The present moment was rarely the real enemy. The enemy was the refusal to let the present moment be what it already was. This is where the deepest shift begins. You stop asking, "How do I escape now?" and you start asking, "What happens if I stop fighting now for one breath?" So they practiced one breath at a time. When they noticed the mind replaying, they would say internally past. When they noticed the mind rehearsing, they would say internally future. When they noticed the mind judging, they would say internally story. Not to shame themselves, just to recognize the pattern. Recognition creates a tiny space, and space creates choice. Then they would return to a simple anchor: breath, body, sound. At first the return lasted only a second, then the mind pulled them away. Then they returned again. At first it felt like failure, but slowly they understood it differently. Returning is success. Returning is training. Returning is how the mind is rewired. Because what you repeat becomes momentum. Momentum becomes habit. Habit becomes the direction of your life. This is cause and effect in living form. The person began to notice how living in the present moment changed their emotions. Before, when anxiety arrived, they treated it like a command. They obeyed it by thinking more, checking more, preparing more, scrolling more, controlling. Now they tried something new. They met anxiety in the present moment as sensation. They felt tightness in the chest. They felt pressure in the throat. They felt buzzing in the belly. They felt restlessness in the legs. And they noticed something surprising. Anxiety was not one solid thing. Anxiety was changing sensations. The body was doing a wave and the mind was adding a story. So they practiced staying with sensation without feeding the story. This did not erase anxiety instantly, but it removed the extra suffering that came from imagining disaster. While the body was already tense, the body began to learn, and it could feel anxiety without needing to panic about anxiety. This was a major healing because many people do not suffer only from fear, they suffer from fear of fear. The mind says, if fear comes, I cannot handle it, and that belief makes fear feel dangerous. But the present moment practice taught a new truth. I can feel this and remain here. I can breathe. I can stay. I can respond wisely later. The person also discovered that anger changes when you stay present. Before anger became a fast story, they always do this. I must win. I must punish. I must prove. I must protect my image. Now they practiced feeling the heat and tension. First the surge in the chest, the tight jaw, the urge to speak quickly, the urge to attack. And in that present moment awareness, they found a pause, not a long pause, sometimes just a breath. But that breath prevented damage. It prevented words that cannot be taken back. It prevented the chain reaction that creates long consequences. They began to see that the present moment is where karma is made. Karma here means momentum of patterns. When you react unconsciously, you repeat the pattern. When you respond consciously, you interrupt the pattern. Interrupting the pattern changes the future. So living in the present moment was not only inner peace, it was moral power. It was the ability to reduce suffering rather than multiply it. Now the person asked a question that many people ask when they hear this teaching. How do I live in the present when I have to plan? This is where their understanding matured, because living in the present does not mean you never use the mind. It means the mind becomes a tool instead of a prison. Planning done consciously is a short visit to the future. For practical reasons, then you return to now. Worry is living in the future, as a home worry is not a tool, it is a loop. So the person practiced a clear rhythm. If a step is needed, plan it, do it, then stop. If no step is needed, return to now. This made their mind cleaner, their decisions became sharper. They spent less energy on endless mental rehearsal and more energy on real action. They also discovered something else. The present moment includes the body, and the body is always honest. When they were present in the body, they noticed early signs of stress, a tight jaw, a shallow breath, a clenched belly. They could soften early rather than waiting until stress became exhaustion. They learned to relax the body slightly while doing ordinary tasks, washing dishes, walking, writing emails, listening to someone speak. This small relaxation changed everything, because the body and mind are not separate. When the body relaxes, the mind becomes less urgent. When the mind becomes less urgent, it becomes easier to stay present. Now, a deeper question emerged. Why is the present moment so hard for the mind? The person began to see the answer. The mind loves identity, and identity is built from story, past story. The mind says, I am this and I must become that. The mind feels important when it narrates. When narration stops, the ego feels threatened, as if silence means disappearance. So the person practiced meeting that fear gently. They did not try to crush the ego. They simply kept returning to the lived experience of now, until the ego learned that silence is not death. Silence is silence is alleviance. In moments of true presence, they felt something simple and powerful. They did not disappear. They were more real. They were less trapped. They were more available to life. This is where awakening becomes practical. Awakening is not a label. Awakening is the shift from being lost in thought to being aware of thought. The person practiced turning attention toward the one who notices. When a thought appeared, they asked, what is aware of this thought right now? When an emotion appeared, they asked, what is aware of this emotion right now? Not to answer with words, but to shift attention into knowing. And each time they felt that awareness is steady while experiences move. This gave them a stability that did not depend on conditions. The world could change and it would, the mood could change and it would, the plans could change and they would, but awareness remained. So living in the present moment became less about holding a perfect mood and more about resting in what is already here. Now let me show you how this played out in real daily scenes, because the present moment is proven in ordinary life, not in theory. A stressful message arrived. Old pattern would be panic, reply, defend, explain, blame. New pattern was pause, feel the body, notice the story forming, take one breath, respond later with clarity. Result: the situation was not always perfect, but it was less chaotic and the person felt less drained. A mistake happened at work. Old pattern would be self-attack, rumination, shame. New pattern was accept the stinginess, sensation, fix what can be fixed, learn one lesson, then return to now. Result: less wasted energy, more focus, more respect for self. A family member triggered an old wound. Old pattern would be argue, prove, punish, withdraw. New pattern was feel the heat, notice the urge, take one breath, speak slower, set a boundary without cruelty. Result: less damage, more clarity, more compassion without being weak. The person realized something. The present moment is where your life is made. Every time you lose the present, you lose your life in that moment, because life is not happening in mental time. Life is happening now. They also realized something that felt bittersweet. Many of their happiest memories were not about big achievements. They were about moments of presence, laughing with someone, feeling sun on the face, listening to rain, holding a hand, being fully there. Those moments were always available, but they had been missed because the mind kept leaving. So the person made a quiet commitment, not a dramatic vow, just a direction. I will practice coming back. I will not wait for life to become perfect. I will meet life now. This commitment changed their days in small ways. They became less addicted to the phone because they started valuing direct experience. They became less addicted to drama because they started tasting the peace of simplicity. They became less obsessed with being seen because they started feeling the quiet dignity of being present. This is where compassion also grew, because when you are present, you see others more clearly, you listen more deeply, you notice the pain behind their behavior. You stop taking everything personally because you see how much of human life is conditioning and fear. Presence does not make you passive, it makes you wise. It makes you capable of responding rather than reacting. And that response is where your destiny shifts, because destiny is not only what happens to you, destiny is what your patterns keep creating. When patterns change, destiny changes. Now, as we close, I want to reflect on what you can take from this story right now. If you want to live in the present moment, do not try to live there forever as a perfect state. Just return for one breath many times a day. Return when you notice worry. Return when you notice rumination. Return when you notice comparison. Return when you notice the inner voice getting loud. Return when you notice tension in the body. Return to breath. Return to sensation. Return to sound. Return to space. Each return is a seed. The seeds accumulate. That accumulation becomes a different mind. A different mind creates a different life. I have seen people transform in this simple way. Someone who lived in anxiety learned to return to body sensation and stopped feeding catastrophic story. Their fears. Often someone who lived in anger learned to pause and feel the surge without acting it out. Their relationships healed. Someone who lived in regret learned to take the lesson and come back to now. Their energy returned. These are not dramatic miracles, they are steady ones, and steady is what lasts. Thank you for being here with me today. Now, I want to invite you to share your experience in the comments. Where do you notice your mind leaving the present most often, and what is one small anchor that helps you come back? And if you want more long-form teachings like this, support the channel by subscribing, liking, and commenting. Your support helps this kind of practical wisdom reach people who are tired of living in mental time and ready to come home to now. Until next time, keep returning, keep practicing, and remember, you do not find the present moment in the future. You find it right here where you already are.